Well, let's have a little fun here with a couple days left to free agents are really started to being pursued and the tampering period really starts. We're going to give you, Jeff and I will give you our dream scenarios in terms of free agents. We'll talk about, first and foremost, the defensive tackles. We'll give you one guy that if the Browns could walk away saying they signed this individual, we will go ahead and be doing cartwheels. We'll do that for the defensive tackle position. Second segment, let's get right off into it. Safety. We'll talk about some of the safeties, and Jeff and I will both pick an individual that if we hear that man's name, sign us up for it. We love it. And then finally, we'll get to the wide receivers, and we'll talk about some guys that are available that we would love to add to this receiving core in this roster. We'll do it all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Browns podcast.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends, your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound LGB on the LOB, the Locked On Browns podcast, brought to you by the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Your hosts, Jeff Lloyd at Jeff_LJ_Lloyd from the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show, on-air personality, the Barbershop Saturday mornings, 92.3 The Fan, Mr. Garrett Bush at GBush91. We appreciate everybody who makes Locked On Browns their first listen every day, whether it is on your favorite podcast platform, always available, always free. Of course, here on YouTube, make sure you subscribe, got notifications on, throw some likes on those episodes for you guys, help the promotion. We appreciate it so much. And if you got Roku, go ahead, search Locked On Cleveland Sports. You will find us, the Locked On Browns podcast, Locked On Guards, Locked On Cavs, of course, the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show as well. So go ahead, give it a run if you do have the time. As Garrett mentioned here, things are going to get really, really spicy here starting coming Monday. Once the tampering period opens up, new league year begins on Wednesday. Plenty of money to be spent, plenty of holes to be filled in the NFL. Still waiting to get some finalizations, maybe from a couple of teams or two on exactly, who's in, who's out. It looks like a late one now. Zadarius Smith, edge rusher for the Minnesota Vikings. His time there with the Vikings might be over. Certainly does not hurt the Browns to have yet another edge rusher joining a free agent class as the Browns try to improve this defense as much as they can for first-year defensive coordinator Jim Schwartz. As Garrett said, we're going to go here, and within each group, these are the three we went with. We're not going to sit here and kibitz about how we're going to rank the biggest needs for this team right now. If you don't have these three as your biggest, that's okay. I get it. It's fine. But we're going to go through the defensive tackle group. We're going to go through the safety group. We are going to go through the wide receiver group, each segment here today, and kind of, pontificating, coming crystal balling, so to speak, what would be a dream scenario here for the Cleveland Browns to hopefully get accomplished, in the next week or so, starting Monday, of course. Now, you look at the defensive tackle room. The defensive tackle free agent list. In an ideal scenario, Javon Hargrave would be about 27 years old. It doesn't hurt that he's 30. It certainly does not. His play has probably steadily improved in his time in the league. Probably the headliner of this class as far as a two-way player effective against the run. Certainly effective as a pass rusher. Fletcher Cox, it seems if the Eagles are going to retain one of these two veterans, all eyes seem to point towards Brandon Graham. If you don't want Fletcher Cox, I'm sure plenty of teams in the NFL will find a spot for Fletcher Cox. Then you get into guys like Davin Tomlinson, solid against the run. David Omoyeda from the New Orleans Saints, a good player. Sheldon Rankins, former Saint, this year with the Jets. Jets did kind of did him a favor. Jets had a lot of defensive linemen, so they kind of took a little wear and tear off of them. Derek Nandi from Kansas City is a guy I've kind of always liked here. But I think, when you get into this, you got to shoot. You got to shoot for the stars. There's just no way around it. And, Javon Hargrave, double digits in sacks last year. One of the things we've always talked about is that Myles Garrett should make things easier for everybody else. But sometimes when your talent is just so underperforming, even, even the free donuts, so to speak, these guys can't get their hands on. You think a guy like Hargrave, and you saw it last year, obviously he was excellent. All the pass rushers for the Philadelphia Eagles were excellent. But for me, the reason I look at this, and this makes a ton of sense, because if the Browns are heavily into this, it means they know something. Obviously, Andrew Berry, formerly, certainly, time with the Eagles. He brought in Kathleen Raish, who, obviously was, his protege in his time with the Eagles. They know this team well. They know this roster well. Javon Hargrave obviously played meaningful football for the Philadelphia Eagles. So, and it looks, for all intents and purposes, the Browns are going to be in it as much as, Hargrave's camp will let them. But I think in a scenario like this, and as severe and deep as the need is a defensive tackle, Garrett, it's got to be Javon Hargrave.
Well, that's the I wouldn't be mad at all if they get that off. You know what I'm saying? It's a situation where he's the guy I think that would be probably the most, I would say, the equipped to come in and give you something for multiple years. I look at what he's able to do. Obviously, he's a guy that I would probably be a number 1 or number 2 on my board, either way it goes. For me, I look at it, I go to the same team. I look at a situation where, I got a guy like Fletcher Cox. I think I could get Fletcher Cox for a little bit cheaper of a price. Obviously, he's a little longer in the tooth, a little older. He may not be the every single down player at this point of his career, but what I could do, if I could get Fletcher Cox for $5 million, if I could get him for a discount and get him in there and be able to play with shorts, I think he can actually add a lot. I can still pair him with a Perion Winfrey, and that looks really good. I still can get him, and I can also go. And the reason I went with this is because we did the defensive line, we did safety, and we did wide receiver. I still would like a little bit left over to go and try to, kick the tires on a Levante Davis. See if Devin Bush still has something left in his tank. Maybe I want to bring a Taki back. Maybe I want to bring an Anthony Walker back. And so that gives me a little bit of wiggle room in terms of the cap, where I could go get 2 for 1, and I still can get a really good player that's going to help the Browns up front and Fletcher Cox. And I still could go shore up the defense in other areas and still probably get an edge rusher or allocate that money to get a linebacker. So, the Eagles are the tough spot here, because there's a couple of guys that I'm going to mention here later on that they still have to look after as well. Brandon Graham is a guy who they want to bring back. You look at the safety that they have in the situation, and you look at the top 3 safeties, and you look on this list, and you still see a guy like Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, who I think is a guy that could play both nickel and some of your hybrid safety stuff. 25 years old. So the Eagles had a great year, and one of the unintended consequences of having a great year is you got a lot of young guys on that team and older guys who are free agents that are going to help some teams out, Jeff.
Look, when you're a team like the Eagles, you're a team like the Kansas City Chiefs, eventually the money is going to start, becoming an issue for you. And what's difficult for them is it's really hard to say, to a guy that's been there, say, hey, look, can we get you to take a little bit less? We can keep this party going. But the point of it is people are after your players because they want players who have played with successful organizations. They want players who are playoff proven. So it's really difficult to say to your guy, hey, could you, maybe, take a little less. We can work something out here. But once you start talking $3-4 million, player don't owe nothing to nobody. And and the Eagles are going to start to feel the effects of it. Look, Jalen Hurts is a fantastic young quarterback. And one of the joys they had for these past 2 seasons was Jalen Hurts was a quarterback playing on a 2nd-round contract. Well, you got one more year of that, and then Jalen Hurts goes in one of the top paid players in the NFL, and it's going to cost you players. It's basically it's just the cost of doing business. It's a credit to yourself for taking a player like Jalen Hurts and developing him like you did, but in order to keep him around, got to pony up, which means sadly you're going to end some relationships other places. And I do like the appeal. Obviously, bringing Fletcher Cox in, it allows you to go chase yet another veteran defensive tackle, add yet another piece. I honestly think you could probably get Fletcher Cox and 2 players annually for the money you would essentially give to Javon Hargrave. So as far as that, that's not necessarily a bad idea. And for me, a guy like Fletcher Cox coming into this room, the man deserves the recognition he's going to get. And Fletcher Cox opens his mouth showing off Super Bowl rings, having just played in yet another Super Bowl. Guys are going to listen. That's a necessity. We're going to move it on here. We're going to go to the safety position. Obviously, another popular one here for the Browns. Certainly some thought here on how they could address it. We'll get to all that. Jeff Lloyd, Garrett Bush, your latest Locked On Browns. The midway point of the NBA season is here, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers can get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and simple and easy to use. Then you can get to betting on everything from the money line to total point scores, 3-pointers drained. And here's the other thing. You're going to devote yourself to 2.5 hours, watch a full game. Why don't you take a bunch of your bets, throw it together in a parlay? You can take some really long shot bets, put some low money down, low risk, high reward. At the end of the game, your team may win, and you may walk away with a pretty decent chunk of change. So don't miss the chance to get your no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA.
Welcome back to Locked On Browns podcast. Jeff Lloyd, G. Bush, thank you so much for making us your first listener each and every day. We are into the fantasy draft. We're doing the fantasy draft of free agents. And we're telling you, man, which guys we would love to see in that Browns uniform, signing that contract sometime next week during the free agent period when it opens. We just talked about, in recap, we got to the defensive tackles. Hey, I said I'd take Fletcher Cox. He said Javon Hargrave. I said, listen, I ain't mad at either one of them, man. We could definitely win some ball games with them. Let's slide on over to the free safety position. And this guy I kind of foreshadowed with it a little bit. He came out of nowhere. Sometimes it just seems like in these free agent periods, we forget about these people. We're like, hold on, that dude is a free agent? We got Chancey Gardner-Johnson, a bit of a hybrid, plays safety and in the slot for Philadelphia, was one of the more impactful players in the secondary in 2022 and 12 games played during the regular season, had 6 interceptions, 8 pass breakups to go along with 67 tackles. When targeted, opposing quarterbacks had a 78.4 passer rating against Gardner-Johnson. At just 25, he'll arguably be one of the top defensive backs on the free market. When you tell me this, listen, man, I love the fact 6 interceptions, 8 pass breakups. And you know how I like my safeties, Jeff. I like my safeties aggressive. I like them faking people. I like them in the box being aggressive. I think if you have a chess piece in the middle of the field that can control the middle of the field and go sideline to sideline, hash to hash, still be a short tackler with 67 tackles, this is the type of free agent I'm looking to get. If the Browns are going to give someone big-time money, I look at the difference between him and Jesse Bates. Now, when you look at it, they're saying they might, via Sport Track, a contract for this type of player will probably be around $13.3 million, which is less than what they would have to pay for a Jesse Bates, or a guy that we're all too familiar with in the AFC North. If you take a comparison to both those guys, Jesse Bates is 26, Chauncey Gardner's is about 25. Not too much difference there, but Jesse Bates is going to want about $14 million as well, and that's the anticipated contract that he'll probably end up getting. So Jesse Bates has a name we're familiar with. Chancey Gardner-Johnson is a guy who's a little bit more of an unknown. Once again, coming from that Philadelphia Eagles, Philadelphia Eagles organization. I would love to get Chancey Gardner-Johnson if the Browns do go with a free safety and do deem that free safety is a bigger position of need than linebacker. I'd go with him. What's your thoughts on who you would bring in and your thoughts on Chancey Gardner-Johnson?
Well, first things first, this is kind of like, if we're going to go between Jesse Bates and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson here, this is kind of like, would you want a steak and a beer? Or would you want a steak and a beer? I don't think you're necessarily going wrong either way in this scenario. The one thing does come to mind, though, and as you spoke about Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, and look, everything you said is 100% true. He's an extremely versatile player. You can do a lot of things with him. But as we talked about when we went around in the first segment here, and you said maybe Fletcher Cox, and the problem isn't so much the money, because the money's not going to be that much difference probably between Jesse Bates and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. And look, everybody, you've been here for a while with me. You all know how I feel about Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, the player he is. And the other thing is I think Chauncey Gardner-Johnson is the kind of guy that brings your defense an identity. Your defense, look, on defense, it's just a different breed, more running of your mouth. And I don't mean that like in a bad way. It's just part of it, man. And you need to let people know and just continue. And he is a chirpy son of a gun. And I love it. I absolutely love those type of players. But the only issue I would see is if it's Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, it leads to more moves to be made. Now, what did you say? One of his best attributes is a nickel player.
Yep.
We kind of already have an issue here with nickel. Mm-hmm. We're not sure who's going to play it. It doesn't seem like anybody's going to say, hey, coach, I'll be the guy who volunteers and I'll go do it. So if you look at it from that vein, then you've got to realize what you're going to do, because you're most likely going to have one of your corners really upset because there's maybe not going to be many reps for him. But the other thing is who's going to play free safety? We still got to make a move and figure out something to go play free safety. So look, if this is the road they want to go down, I got zero issues with bringing in Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. I just think if you bring in Jesse Bates, and look, Jesse Bates can be the first name we hear for the Browns. If it happens on Monday, when they say it's Monday and it's noon, we could literally have a report in seconds that say, Jesse Bates and Cleveland Browns have agreed to terms. If the Browns are 100% in, they probably know whether or not Jesse Bates is serious about the Browns already. It's not that difficult to do when your star quarterback, who makes $53 million a year, is represented by the guy who's also got one of the top players. I mean, this is literally a text. Hey, does Jesse have interest in us? Does Jesse have interest in us?
Right.
We know what the numbers look like. We kind of have an idea what the parameters of a deal are going to look like. Does Jesse want to come play here? And very simple. Yes, yes, no, yes, let's talk. He's got eyes otherwise. I know a lot of people, Jesse Bates, I think I'm pretty sure he's from Indiana. Yes, he ended up at Wake Forest, but it's not like, he certainly is a Midwest kid. So, staying in, that area, obviously, is not very, unappealing to the young man. Is where the area has been his entire life. But I just think if you get Bates, you now have your free safety. You want to get Chauncey Gardner-Johnson because of all of the things that Garrett said. I have zero zilch with any of it. But that leads to more tending to the garden, so to speak, that's got to be done. Do you have to move on from one of the corners that's here? You still have to find a free safety. And if you were going to do that, the draft doesn't look like an option where you think you can bring in somebody who's going to be able to start from day one. I'll go the Jesse Bates route here, but I will feel free and easy, G, to go ahead and wave the white flag of surrender. Now, I don't think you're necessarily losing in this proposition any way whatsoever. Both of the guys are phenomenal players, and there are some good safeties in this class. As far as free agency, but as far as upper echelon, and then very good safeties, star safeties, certainly there's a big, obviously, difference and gap there.
By the way, Jeff, there's a couple. There's two other guys. It's kind of crazy about this. You got another guy, Jordan Poyer, who is a former Brown, 32 years old, Buffalo Bill team captain. He's another guy that.
And with Jordan Poyer at 32 years old, he's done so much in his life. There's a lot of people that say that Jordan Poyer may have been older at 26, 27 years old than he actually is now at 32.
Right. Right. They feel like he's been in the league forever. I thought Jordan Poyer was playing with your boy Colt McCoy. I was like, man, was he there when Colt was? It just seems like he's been in the league a long time. I don't know how much he has.
Was he here when they first came back? Right. Yeah. It feels like he was here with Tim Couch, right?
He played with Raven Trone. I know for a fact he played with Raven Trone. I know him and Jason Trusnick. I saw him out in the flats, East Paint. No, I'm playing. Man.
Yeah. So look, I mean, for the Browns, look, it's gonna be you got to get to work here, and you got to, and the thing is, you got to sell these guys. And I don't believe there's going to be an issue here getting players in the building. I don't think anybody is going to look at the Brown season last year and say, well, I don't think Deshaun Watson and you guys are. I don't think anybody's going to do that. Obviously it's going to cost you money, but I think this is still a pretty viable destination. Mm-hmm. That's what we're going to do here. We're going to do wide receiver position here, trying to find, another fit here that make fit in a dream scenario. Jeff Lloyd, Garrett Bush, we appreciate all of you for making Locked On Browns your first listen every single day.
Yeah, right. We right back at it. Locked On Browns podcast. Make sure you follow us at GBush91 on Twitter. Also, definitely follow me as well on Jeff as well as Jeff_LJ_Lloyd on Twitter as well. And make sure that you guys download and actually not download, but subscribe to the Locked On Browns podcast Twitter page, because if you don't check out YouTube, we post all of our upcoming ads, all of our upcoming videos right there on the Locked On Twitter. You can check that out. Click the link. You can get right to all our videos as well.
Also, let me just jump in real quick, G. Also, actually, we've gotten word today, from our bosses, from YouTube. We've been greenlit to go with shorts again if we want to. And this is always good for this time of year. Look, G is obviously, a lot more committed with his time, to other avenues. But for me to sit here and at any time G can jump in, of course, but for me to sit here and take you through 5 minutes of a prospective draft pick, 5 minutes of a prospective free agent, it's just other opportunities for us to continue to give you content. And, they weren't sure exactly how they wanted to handle this. And I think for the most of us, it was just, hey, I don't think any content is going to hurt anything. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. If it's a 30-minute, if it's a 7-minute, we're just, obviously trying to bring as many eyes to the page. And for the people who are already loyal followers here, and obviously you guys mean the world to us, just give you, more and more content to absorb. But go ahead, Jay.
Oh, yeah, no doubt. That's going to be big, because now, you get twofold. If I'm out moving around, I could pop on and give you a short. If Jeff is moving on, he could pop around. And obviously, we kind of have both different schedules, but it's a great opportunity doing shorts, because it does keep you in contact with what's going on. If there's anything that happens as far as breaking news, we can do that very quickly and efficiently. So it's just another avenue or an opportunity for us to continue to give you the best content. Let's get into these wide receivers. The receiver core class is what is the rest of the units are. And that's just because wide receivers, if you're pretty good, you don't reach the market like that. Oftentimes, you either have to trade for a good receiver, you draft a good receiver, but the high-priced, big-time receivers really don't enter the market. Take a look at some of your best receivers that are above 30. The Devontae Adams of the world, the guys like Cooper Kupp. All of those guys are not going to be reaching free agency, even though they're in their 30s. So you have a different pool of guys that come up. So what I'm looking for is, I would really love to get a receiver in the draft or in a trade. But I do think there's some guys that that you can look out for. One of the guys that you look at is Hunter Renfrow. He's a guy who is out in Las Vegas, played with Deshaun Watson. He's a slot guy. He had a down year this year, but last year was a really great year. If anybody had Hunter Renfrow in terms of the fantasy game, if you play fantasy, Hunter Renfrow was a thing a couple of years ago. So he that's a guy that you look at. And then you got McCole Hartman. He's a guy that played in a system with Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. So he's a guy that has speed, but the problem with him, unable to stay on the field, usually hurt 3-4 times a year. So it's a thing where that's a very risky type thing. And a guy who I've just kind of really settled on lately is, I would really like to give Paris Campbell. I like Paris Campbell. I like him as a guy. He's a bigger receiver. He's a guy he also has some injury problems, but when you reach free agency, there's something wrong with you. But he's a guy that's a speed guy. He's a guy that can catch the ball. He's a guy that I could see doing some other things. And I think the reason I go with him is because I get a guy that I think I could trade for in a Brandon Cooks or DeAndre Hopkins or whoever may be available. and I can still get a guy like Paris Campbell to add to that receiving core to go in there and add to what they got with Cooper and DPJ and some of the other lesser known guys. I like him over what's available at Adam Thielen. He's not really a burner. They have a couple other guys, but nothing too crazy when it comes to receiver, Jeff. So I would go with Paris Campbell as a receiver that I would like to bring in as a free agency. What about you?
I'm going to go with, someone you mentioned and someone on the similar, I would say skill set type of offensive weapon that Paris Campbell is. And look, you can use Paris Campbell. You can hand the ball. I'm saying you could use him in, jet type of motion. You can run all sorts of wide receiver screens with him. We're at this point, where there's guys who are labeled as wide receivers, but maybe technically by the pure definition, if it's, not been changed, not necessarily just, totally wide receivers, just like in the NBA, all of a sudden wing became a position. Wing was never a position. You know what I'm saying? You're a small forward, you're a shooting guard. Oh, you're a wing. This is what we have now, with these types of wide receivers, guys that you want to manufacture touches for. And this is one I do want to get into just real quick. Cause I heard this a bunch in a little backlash about, my speaking on Jackson Smith and Jigba. Oh, well, he schemed open. Well, guess what, guys? Even the players who were schemed open, there's got to be a pecking order. There's the best of the best. Cooper Kupp schemed open a ton. Cooper Kupp is still one of the best to do it. So I don't want to hear if they're schemed open or you're manufacturing touches for players. That means you're really, really good at what you do. And you still, look, if you're still the best, it doesn't matter. And obviously everybody's trying to manufacture touches. I will stick with Mecole Hardman. And again, this is my premise here is you are trying to get talent from proven commodities franchise-wise. Look, Mecole Hardman has played in 3 Super Bowls. He's through 4 years in the league. Kid's played in 3 Super Bowls. He's won 2 of them. Like Paris Campbell, like Mecole Hardman, when you have these type of guys, there are core injuries, there are hamstring injuries, there are ankle injuries. The other thing I do like about Mecole Hardman is this isn't necessarily going to upset the apple cart here. You know what I'm saying? Like some of you guys talk about Brandon Cooks and Nuke Hopkins. Okay, do you want to see Amari Cooper's numbers go exponentially down? Do you want to see Donovan Peoples-Jones's numbers go exponentially down? Do you want to see David Njoku's numbers go exponentially down? When you bring in somebody who's maybe on par with all those guys, and this is something we learned from the Baker era with Jarvis, it's hard to keep everybody fed and everybody happy. It's really, really difficult to do. Mecole Hardman's entire career, though, it's been the Mahomes. For most of the time, it was Tyreek Hill. It was Travis Kelce. Mecole Hardman is okay with a smaller workload. It's kind of been what he is accustomed to. He's not going to be the number one option very often. You are going to use him more in opportunities, or even Paris Campbell, in opportunities where the coverage has been shifted to Donovan Peoples-Jones. It's been shifted to Amari Cooper. They are keying on David Njoku. And now you can take these players and, everybody wants to, when they say they want fast players, they automatically think deep. Well, fast players, where they're even just as effective, is going 52 yards wide. When you can take the ball on one hash, you end up going 27 yards and you end up getting pushed out of bounds on the other side of the field. That is fast. That is deep. You are stretching the field. Everybody wants to talk about 100 yards long. Nobody ever wants to talk about 52 yards wide. It is just as essential. It is just as important. And it is, in a lot of cases, it's almost even more difficult to cover, because it's not like where you're on the outside and I can say, all right, well, if I just keep my body between the ball, and out of bounds, I've already given myself help in my coverage. In the middle of the field, these guys in the slot doing this dirty work with the nasty footwork makes for a long, long day. So I think either Hardman or Campbell, probably severe targets for the Browns that they should really consider. I would say Campbell probably goes for a little bit less money. He's missed a lot more time over his career than maybe Mecole Hardman is. Maybe you're paying a little bit of tax on Mecole Hardman because he is coming from the Chiefs and has had all that success. But we got some players here at the defensive tackle position, G. We got some players at the safety position, players at the wide receiver position. And I think all of these are integral, probably ones to get. The Browns need to hit on a veteran defensive tackle. The Browns, draft-wise, cannot count on a rookie safety. And I don't think they're going to be in I don't think the wide receivers that they would have faith in, they're going to have a sniff at drafting 42 overall. So that's why, in my opinion, these three positional groups are very, very key here, for the Browns to get something done in free agency.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely think they're going to get something done. All of the names that we've mentioned, all of the 6 names that we mentioned, the defensive tackle, free safety, and wide receiver positions, I'm not mad at any of them. If they can get those guys, any of these 6 guys, it's splitting hairs on a lot of them. And if we can't get one, I think we really need to go, and try to get another. So the best thing I love to see is them being aggressive. And I think at the end of the day, that's all we care about, Jeff, is, hey, if you find a guy, we need major upgrades at these positions. And your job's not done if you get a D tackle. Your job's not done if you need to say, your job isn't done if you get a receiver. You have to do multiple things in rebuilding this team and getting them to a point where they could be a contender in this small window for all of their best players' primes.
Yeah, there's a lot to be done, but and the fickle thing and always the tricky thing with all of this is, if for what's you need, is it available? Because that's not always the way things work out. Luckily for the Cleveland Browns, it looks like they have options as far as what their biggest needs are, so they can get that put to bed and then go ahead and start working on what will be the 2023 draft class. He is Garrett Bush at GBush91. Part of the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show, Monday through Friday, 11 to 1. Every Saturday morning, barbershop open at 92.3 The Fan. Certainly other opportunities to catch Garrett over there. Myself, Jeff Lloyd, at Jeff_LJ_Lloyd. The show at Locked On Browns. Follow back account, as everybody knows. We appreciate everybody who makes Locked On Brown their first listen, whether it is on your favorite podcast app, always available, always free. Of course, here on YouTube, make sure you subscribe, notifications on, throw some likes on the episodes for you guys, help the promotion. We do appreciate all that. And if you do have Roku, go ahead and search Locked On Cleveland Sports. You will get Locked On Browns coverage, Locked On Guardians, Locked On Cavaliers, and of course, the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show. All that being said, this has been your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound, LGB on ELOB. Let's go Browns.